you. Welcome to the Cult Bar. Sorry, you saw me jamming to our music there a little bit. So, it's catchy. It's catchy, and it's got a nice beat. So, hi, Renee. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Hanging in there. So, we got. You came up with this one. It's actually one I'd never heard before, so it's going to be exciting to talk about this week. But first, we got to do our requisite things before we jump in here. So, give us the spiel.
Yes. Okay. So, trigger warning for spiritual abuse, as always. I'm also going to throw one in for restricted eating. I don't feel like it was imposed on the people in the cult, but there's a lot of dietary stuff that's going to come up. So if that's an issue for you, just be aware. Child sexual abuse is going to play a role, unfortunately, human trafficking, and suicide. Oh, and there is also some labor and delivery stuff that's a little dicey.
A little dicey. Smidge.
It's a debate. There's a debate about how dicey it was. We'll get there.
Yep. Why don't we, before we delve into our stuff, why don't we talk a little bit about the old cult news that you have?
Yeah. So news today is I got excited. Sorry. We're excited today. So actually we're not going to delve too deep into this news because we're actually going to cover this cult next month. But if you've been even vaguely aware of the news going on at Sarah Lawrence, there was a sex trafficking cult at the Sarah Lawrence College, and there has just been sentencing. The woman who was kind of second in command in this thing was sentenced for 4.5 years. And we had conspiracy to launder money, sex trafficking, and she's been called an enforcer. So we'll get into that next month on our next episode. Mm-hmm. And yeah, so that's the news. There, spoiler alert for next month, there is justice, which is always nice.
It's always nice to see and not have to wait for it and be like, we'll talk about this later.
Right, yeah.
But before we even delve into the thing next week, we already know that there's justice served, so that's good news. Okay, so this month, we are going to talk about the Source family, which was one you said, hey, we should talk about these folks. I had never heard of them. So maybe I was under a rock because I like learning about cult stuff. So basically the Source family, which you see here, this is the cover for the documentary that was made about them. Was set in came about in the 60s. Kind of starts off seemingly like just one more hippie commune kind of thing. The guy that's ish, the guy that's there and that was shown there in the robes and prostrating himself. That guy named Jim Baker, who later became known as Father Yod and
Yod.
Yod, not Yod, Yod.
Yeah,
and then there was Yahowa, which was very close to Yeshua, which was interesting. But
right.
He decides like he has this restaurant called The Source, and that's kind of where the epicenter of everything happens. And he brings in a myriad of folks, largely young and underage people. And basically they decide we're going to pool our money and we're going to, live all together. And they do that and shit goes off the rails there. Pretty fast. This is not like a slow moving thing. This thing goes roller coaster down the first hill thing. So, it's it's pretty intense. What's funny is like when we were watching the documentary, the first half of the documentary, I'm like, oh, well, so far, it just seems kind of like a bunch of hippies, free love and all that stuff. And then all of a sudden stuff starts going and it really goes really fast after that. Like, oh, now I see why they made this. So, yeah.
Yeah. So before we go any further, what are you drinking today, Doug?
Yeah, I do this on Brothers and Booze too, where I keep forgetting to ask people what they're drinking. So I, in honor of the Source family, which called themselves Aquarians, This is the Age of Aquarius cocktail. This is mezcal, lime, passion fruit syrup, and honey syrup, and shaken over ice and poured, and that's what it looks like. It smells smoky as hell from the most mezcal.
It sounds
So
amazing, though. I love mezcal.
I like it too, but like with all the citrus, I'm hoping this is really good. So, oh, yes,
All right.
yes, that's a winner. I was really worried. And the cocktail originally called for like a Campari float, which I hate Campari, so I was like, I'm ignoring that. So yeah, pass on that. But that's what I have. What do you have? What's in your?
I'm having, and if you're watching or listening at home and you haven't seen the documentary, you won't get this till later. I'm having a hang glider, and this is muddled raspberries, vodka, simple syrup, or if you're me and you forgot you're out of simple syrup, just some sugar muddled with the raspberries, and lemon juice, and sparkling water to top it off.
So it's like a spritzer?
Like a vodka spritzer, yeah.
What do you think of
very
it?
summery drink as like 3 or 4 inches of snow sit outside my window.
But do you like the drink?
I do. It's really nice. I think I'd probably add more raspberry next time. It called for 6. I think it could use like more of that oomph in it, but otherwise it's really nice.
Some of the tartness there, yeah. So cool. Okay, so where you want to start, my friend? We have a lot to get to. So where would you like to kick this off?
You know what I want to do? I want to point out, because this struck me while I was watching, because I saw this before, like 2 or 3 years ago, and I haven't watched it since. And I'm watching it, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I think Keith Raniere copied this guy.
Yeah, you could see it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't think of that.
So he is an actual judo champion in his adult life, for real.
Yeah, not a fake one like
Raniere
Raniere.
pretends. He says he's the strongest man in the world. Debatable. Didn't look particularly
hawkish.
strong. Yeah, he looked pretty normal. And the most spiritual man in the world. He was, if this cult started in the 1990s instead of the 1960s, he would have been the most interesting man in the world. But the craziest thing, in my opinion, about his past is he murdered people with judo. Like Nicolas Cage in Con Air, but judo.
Yep.
It's like, but one of them, he like beat him up with judo and then shot him, which I thought was
a bit of a cheat.
Yeah, I mean, you already know you can do it. You did it once.
Yeah.
The documentary doesn't really get into why he was judo murdering people, just that he did.
Yeah, it was like very, very laissez-faire about the reasoning behind all the judo killing.
Yeah, and then the other thing that I found really interesting, because he thinks of himself as a father figure to all the people in this cult, was that he was married, had 2 kids, and abandoned them. Got married again, had 3 kids, and then abandoned them. Mm-hmm. And he shows up in LA, supposedly a millionaire. I don't know. They don't really say if that's true. You hear it from the point of view of the cult members. And he takes, oh, my earring fell off. He takes their money and like buys them stuff. But like, where did the money come from? How did he keep it while he was in judo jail? I don't know. So that was
well, part of the past too is that he robbed banks.
I forgot about the bank. How do you?
Yeah, he robbed a couple banks, and that's how he bankrolled his first couple restaurants, which were pretty successful restaurants in LA, from what they were making it sound like. Now, whether that's true or not, they ended up closing or whatever. But
here's my question about that, there, Doug. Like in the 1960s, to drive a Rolls Royce off the back of your restaurant, how successful does your restaurant have to be?
Yeah, it's a restaurant, and it wasn't like fine dining or anything like that. It was just a vegan,
raw food, vegan restaurant.
Yeah, and the idea that they had so they had this one restaurant. It was one restaurant where all this was out of, because the other ones got closed or bought out or whatever happened. It kind of sounded like he ran them into the ground a bit. But the other thing is, all these people kept saying they came to the source and they just started working there. And I was like, how are they paying these people?
They weren't paying them, Doug.
Yeah, it had to be like
No,
indentured servitude.
Remember the woman who was dating the rock and roll photographer?
Yeah.
And she tried to get him to join. This is okay. I feel like we have to tell this story because it's really funny. He's doing a photo shoot and he needs people who look like Jesus. And so he sends his girlfriend out to like cast people who look like Jesus. And she's like, I know where I'm going to go. And she goes to the restaurant because all the dudes dress in white and have like long hair and beards, which wasn't like super unusual at that time, but they were pretty concentrated. And then she asks to meet, I think by then he was going by Father Yod. I'm not sure. And she just decides she's joining this cult. And she tells her boyfriend, join the cult. And he's like, I'm a successful photographer. I'm not going to go work at a restaurant for free. What is wrong with you?
That's right. I forgot he said the free part, but yeah. Yeah, he was like a world famous, like one of the most renowned rock and roll photographers. And she's like, yeah, just give all that up and come work for this dude over at this vegan restaurant.
Yeah. just pick microgreens. It'll be fun.
Yeah. Here's have some. The watercress is superb. Yeah, the judo champions. Like, there's a lot of, like, when you said like the strongest man in the world, it kind of did harken back to the Renee being like the smartest man in the world kind of deal, because Renee clearly couldn't pull the strongest man thing, so he had to do a different route. But yeah,
but he was a judo champion.
Oh, apparently.
So the moral of the story is, don't get your kids into judo. They will grow up to run a cult.
Important safety tip you got. Oh man. So it's interesting because like the beginnings, it sounds pretty earnest, right? Like, just kind of live your life and be happy and everybody's big thing. What's that?
I disagree. Because he got into Swami Satchidananda, remember?
Oh yeah, but I'm talking like at the beginning of the documentary, and the people were coming in, and it just they made it. It just seemed like some sort of really like trippy hippie thing that like they all enjoyed, and yeah, that might have been the case, but like there was other shit going on. But like I said, the first part of the documentary is like you're watching it, and you're like, okay, where's the cult stuff? Like I could see it a little bit, but it's not really going full fledged, and then it kind of ramps up, and like then you're like, oh, okay, now I know why we're here.
Well, you know what it reminded me of, Doug, is I heard this story, and I cannot remember the name of the guy who told it, but I heard it on a morning radio show 25 years ago, probably. And he said he picked up a hitchhiker in Central California, maybe it was Southern California, whatever. And he takes the guy to the commune he lives on, and it turns out that this is Tex Watson, is the hitchhiker, and he is at wherever Charles Manson was living at the time, and he loved it. He had such a great time. It's so wonderful, and they're like, stay, but he decided to leave, and he said for years after that, I lost my other earring. What the heck?
They're not wanting to be on screen.
Yeah, years after that, he said, if I go missing, don't look for me. That's where I am. And then year or two after that, the news hit. And I feel like that's kind of similar, right? Where people were just like, oh, he had such an aura. He made you feel so special. He would buy you anything you wanted, which I thought was super weird coming from this like yoga guru inspired thing. But it was also like, do you want a car? Like,
yeah, it was kind of weird, but I don't know. So you're saying like from the Getty up, you were like, yeah, that's not like, it doesn't feel like a hippie thing. Like, again, I was just going at it from the documentary part.
Yeah. Well, so if you remember before, there's like a cold open to the documentary, right? So before you get like the credit intro part, there's clips of people talking about him, and one of the people says they swear they saw lightning bolts come out of Father Yod's head, and like stuff like that. And then you hear this story of the guy goes to the restaurant and he sees Father Yod and he drops to his knees and kisses his feet just out of nowhere. And Father Yod's like, yes, you're my
Right.
son, you belong here. And I'm like, not normal.
He said far out, man, or something.
Oh yeah, first
Stereotypically hippie thing, but yeah.
But then it was like, you're my son, you
Mm.
belong here. He's like, I do. I'm gonna work for free at your restaurant.
How good was the weed back then? Because holy shit, these people.
It wasn't good. That's the thing that's crazy. Compared to what we have now, it was nothing.
Like, wow, just the way people were like, that's a super gullible thing to. I mean, we talk a lot about people going into cults and they're vulnerable, and that happens. But this is like oddball shit. Like you were talking about the photographer's girlfriend, and when she met him, she was just mesmerized by him when she saw him, and I'm like,
and you look at the guy and you're like,
I'm like going, okay, like I don't see it, but also like. I mean, we've all had magnetism moments with certain people in your life that you're just drawn to them for whatever purpose or reason, but not like, hey, I'm going to abandon all my shit for this guy right here who I just met. Like, I know nothing about him, nothing about what's going on here. Yep, I'm in. And just, I don't know.
You know what I wonder, Doug? I wonder if, like, part of this, because we're getting there. We're getting to the story after the restaurant is already established and successful, and he has already decided that he's a guru, right? Because initially, my guru is Swami Satchidananda, who is also very culty. And his friend said, oh, when are you going to take his picture down and put yours up? Oh, I'd never do that. You know, he's the most amazing spiritual whatever. And she said 6 months later, it's his picture above the mantle, right?
Yep.
So we're like in this like place where it's just starting out. I wonder like if what he did was to sort of maybe his hiring practices or the way that he organized his social life is that he started with really vulnerable people and, you know, love bomb them and hype them up like cults do. And then when new people come in, there's like this energy, right? That everybody is so happy and everybody seems so enlightened and relaxed. And I've heard so much about this man and now I'm meeting him and I feel the same. Like, I think that might be part of it.
Yeah, maybe some sort of snowball effect, maybe sort of thing, I guess. But it's like I said, it's hard for me to grasp it at times, but I have to understand that like the way my brain works isn't the way everybody else's brain works, and sometimes I neglect to keep that in mind.
Yeah, I like when I meet somebody I feel is very magnetic. I'm like, I want to be their best friend. I want to get invited to their Christmas party. And these people are like, I want to worship you. And it's like, oh.
Yeah, that's a different level. Yeah. Oh, so right now you talked about we're at the point where the restaurant's doing well and he's starting to kind of grow the flock, for lack of a better term. Can we talk a bit about the people he would bring in? Because one of them that stuck out to me was this one woman saying that when she was 12, she would skip school and go to the source and work at 12. And
for free, almost certainly.
For free, and met with him. And he was very magnetic was always a thing, and just like clearly grooming, and just the amount of grooming was a lot. So I'm not sure I'm the person to explain that best, but that was like really there's a lot of unnerving stuff, but that was very unnerving. Just the idea that a 12-year-old was going there and they're like, yeah, come on in. Like,
this is not to excuse him at all, but to just kind of be like, what the fuck was going on in America at the time? The 60s and 70s were just like this really weird time where it seemed like tweens and young teenagers had a level of freedom. Like, people romanticize it, but the level of freedom was like scary. Like this lawsuit that's coming against Steven Tyler, he wrote about it openly in his memoirs because I didn't do anything wrong. This girl's mom signed over guardianship to me. And he was just taking a 13-year-old girl on tour with him, or 14, pumping her full of drugs and having sex with her. And her mom was fine with that. The woman that Jimmy Page took on tour when she was a teenager, her mom signed off on that. Like, these like baby groupies would leave home and follow bands around, and their parents knew that that's what they were doing. They may not have liked it per se, but they weren't like calling the cops and having them brought home.
Yeah.
A lot of the girls in the Manson family were under 16. Like, it was just a really fucking weird time. And I don't know how to process it, because like I have a 13-year-old right now, and I'm like, I don't trust you to walk home from school because people drive crazy on the road you have to go on. And these people were like, yeah, go hitchhike across America. What's the worst that could happen? Here, oh, this 30-year-old rock star wants to take you on tour. Sure, I'll sign the paperwork. Like, what is going on? And so that, as horrifying as it definitely is, and as shocking as it sounds today, like, that was happening at, I wouldn't say it was like the norm by any stretch, but it was like people were not having their children taken away for allowing
Yeah.
these things.
Mm-hmm.
It's super weird.
Yeah. This is a good point, but what I would say to this that makes it a bit different is Pentecostal church, usually you're in it when you're little, and you're kind of browbeaten into it a bit, where these people, it's just like they walk up to this guy and they're just like immediately abandoning their lives and just joining his thing. That's the part that seems very odd to me. It's not like, I get the understanding of grooming and like indoctrination and things like that, when it comes to a religious perspective, to me it feels like that's a time thing that just keeps.
Yeah.
Whereas this was like, oh, I saw this guy and bam, I was in. And that's the part. And it's not so much that maybe gullible is the wrong word. That makes it sound like they're not smart. Smart people get involved in this stuff all the time.
Yeah. And I think the other thing is that he had also, and this is still true now, is that like if celebrity is doing something, a large amount of the population will be like, then it must be good. And a lot of celebrities went to that restaurant. They weren't involved in the cult aspect at all, but they were there. They were present. And like, you might think, oh, well, yeah, my 12-year-old's going down there and volunteering to like wash dishes, but you know, she just wants to see if she can spot
Marlon Brando or somebody
like
in there.
Annie Hall was filmed. Parts of Annie Hall were filmed there. Like, there's this whole, I don't know. I think that played a part, I guess is what I'm saying.
Maybe that's where Woody Allen got his ideas from.
I don't know that we can blame Father Yod for that.
No, I don't think we can. But maybe he felt like kinship there. I don't know.
He felt comfortable in that environment. I wonder why.
All right. So let's not dwell on that a bit too much. But yeah, the clientele bit was like the members coming in were all very, very, very young. And
the men weren't, though. That's
some of the men were in like their early 20s, which isn't tremendously old, but compared to the girls, it was way older.
Well, so this was like really blipped because the information around this fact was really shocking. But the girl who had the first baby, which we'll get to that story because it's wild.
Yes.
She was what, 16 or 17, and her husband was 29.
Oh, I thought he was 21.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
I must have misread or misheard that. So, yeah, and to the point, they got married because Father Yod told them to. So
this is interesting, right? Because that's really common in cults, right? Where the leader will be like, you marry this person, you whatever. But in this one, the reason is particularly upsetting, right? So
yes,
he moves all of his little cult into this house that a mansion that they were renting. And somebody's mother wasn't okay with it. Like, there's one mom in all of LA that's like, my 13-year-old belongs at home, not in your weird thing. And they sent the cops over. They took her home. I think they said she comes back a couple times. And he decides that the way around this is to have all the underage girls get married.
Yep, because the police were now on the trail of the underage girls. They were actually, I believe they said they were actively keeping an eye on them because of that one mom being responsible. The only mom in LA.
Meanwhile, her neighbor's daughter is hanging out with Charles Manson, and
Yeah,
it's so weird.
it is. It's a weird time. Like, it's a weird time. Like you said, it's pretty wild to think about, like, just how permissive it was for kids. I mean, this isn't even like latchkey time. Like, latchkey was my age. Latchkey was like
Like
80s.
most of these people had parents at home, like obviously at home, but like full time at home, a parent all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to wrap my brain around. I hear these stories, and it's just like, I don't care who you are. Like, you come to my house and say you want to like move my minor child into your home or take them on tour or whatever, I'm going to be like, no. And if I see you around here again, I will kill you with my bare hands.
Or with a judo chop.
Or with a judo chop.
Judo mom.
I'm sorry. I'm going to go back to this because that is literally, again, that is the plot to Con Air. He lived the plot to Con Air. Or the premise, I guess, not the plot. But still, it's like, what?
Yeah, that's just fucking... It seems unbelievable, right? It seems unbelievable.
But that part is one of the few things
that's actually true.
Facts. I know. It's like, oh my God.
Yeah. Oh, man. So one of the other things that I really wanted to talk about too was not to gloss over the underage stuff. That's something we're going to get. We'll have more coming for that. That's a recurring theme through the whole time. So, but one of the, also part of it is like when he finally gets everybody there, they make like a list of rules, right? And some of them were like some of them were like really, really, really like, this is like, oh, now you're super occult because you're doing things like no blood transfusions without approval from the family, and like things like medical care. You don't go to the hospital, and just like
the one that really blew my mind, because this should have been a red, like not even a red flag, like a red neon sign, an actual literal siren with the little, the cop car thing.
Yeah.
Love your earthly spiritual father more than yourself. Are we all equals here, or is this guy the one?
No, and he never said they were equals either. That was one thing he didn't do. Like, some of them will be like,
I don't know.
It feels like it was implied that we're all together, but like he was always above everybody. And
because there was some conversation in the documentary where it was like it's like a recording of him, because again, like Keith Raniere, he really liked to be recorded, and he's saying like, I need you, and I need, he's trying to make it sound like it's a two-way street, even though it's super obviously not.
Yeah, he says, I need you and you need me, like to like a group of people. Like, it's when it was a recording, but it was like clearly a group of people he was talking to. So yeah, I mean, one of the other rules was which he later completely just decided to not follow anymore, was a man and a wife shall not be torn apart, or I forget what the actual phrasing was, but it was
There's
something
the other one I thought was interesting, because so one of the things about this cult that is kind of weird is they don't really believe in any one thing. They kind of just believed in whatever he decided he was into at the moment.
Yep.
Which changed a lot. But one of the things they did was they'd have these meditation / breathing exercise things first thing in the morning, and they would smoke weed first. One of the guys said the combination of like being high and these breathing exercises and the fact that it was really early in the morning, it made it almost like they were doing I don't know if he said psychedelics or hallucinogens, one or the other.
Yeah, I think it was psychedelics, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, but the point is that on that list it also said no drugs or alcohol.
And then they were doing that every day.
Yeah, I was like, did they stop after the rules, or did he do one of those things? Was like, well, weed's not a drug. I don't know. It's
That's
very
gonna be my
like,
guess. That would be my guess. Is like I remember seeing the thing about no alcohol and all that stuff, and as usual with the cult stuff, gets very strict about different things. But I also the leader never really follows those things. They kind of do their own thing anyhow. But yeah, the rules thing was like not that everything wasn't like, oh, this is pretty bad. The rules thing always, for some reason, that always gets me when they have a set of rules that are written down, which later on that's if something ever comes about, that's going to be what buries you, is the fact that you wrote it down, that these are the rules.
I feel like you almost not in general, but in a situation like this where everyone lives together, like you already have a certain level of undue influence, and you could almost be like, well, we all have to live together in the house. We have to agree to some ground rules. And you think it's going to be like a roommate agreement, and then it's like, you have to love me more than anything.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot
Yeah.
go to the doctor. It's like, whoa, I thought this was going to be about whose turn it was to do the dishes.
Yeah, who's going to cut up the greens today? Oh no, you can't have anything above me. Oh, that's a whole different little can of worms there. But yeah.
Well, speaking of greens, this was the thing I thought was particularly funny because it's such a random belief to hold. So they had to eat an all raw food diet, which, there's people today that do that. And so it's not particularly out there, but you couldn't meal prep. You're not allowed to meal prep because once you cut a vegetable, you had to eat it within 15 minutes or its life force would leave it and it was no longer food.
So does that mean they were like wanting to eat like the Veggie Tales vegetables?
Or cucumber Bob, tomato Bob. I can't remember what. Oh, Larry is the cucumber. Sorry.
Yes, Larry the cucumber. Yes, that is just wild to me. Like the idea of like, oh well, the life force is gone. Like
So you
what?
just cut it up and put
What?
it in some cold water. It'll be fine. Get a salad spinner. Everything's okay. I promise.
um, sorry, that just the life force thing
So
just gets me.
it
This
was
gets
so
me.
off the wall. It was you have to eat it with and I guess that's where it kind of like there's certain elements that like feel like creepily reminiscent of like modern wellness grifts.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think celery juice was one of the ones that was like if you got it bottled, then it wouldn't do all the things they said it did. But if you made it fresh yourself with your expensive juicer, then it could like prevent every disease and cure cancer. It felt like that a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, kind of like, and it's always that. It's always like some miracle thing, like, oh, well, if you drink 2 glasses of milk a day, then you're going to be super healthy. And then 2 years later, like, nope, that's bad. So the health thing's always just kind
Here's
of
the
topsy
side
turvy.
it haunts me every day. Okay. Every time I think about wellness, diet fads, all of that, this haunts me. Um, Gwyneth Paltrow was doing one of those here's what I eat in a day interviews.
Yep.
And the big, like there's a big fad now to drink alkaline water.
Yes.
And she said she starts every morning with a glass of alkaline water with a spritz of lemon in it. And
Which,
I just can't cope with it. It has haunted me it's been like 6 months since I heard about it.
so much for your alkaline water there, Gwyneth.
Like, okay.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
she eats her vegetables like in 14 minutes as well. I don't know.
Maybe she does. Maybe she does. So yeah, this is exactly it.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's always these cults almost always are high control. Unarius being kind of like a weird offshoot that isn't. That's like the exception that proves the rule, I think. But
Yeah.
but most of them are like this. So yeah, it is always the high control things. So, blah.
So I want to go back to the weed meditation because
Yeah.
one of my favorite parts of the documentary was the guy who explained how it worked. Do you remember? So you get high, you do these breathing exercises. He rambles on because they even said like it didn't sound like it was like planned. or scripted. He would just talk, and you do these breathing exercises, and then you were supposed to fall into this meditative state. Oh, sorry. You had to. It was, first of all, it was an optical illusion. You had to stare at the moon for 15 minutes straight, and then close your eyes, and you would see the moon in your head, like the focal imprint. And then you would drop into the halls of Amante, which were supposed to be some spiritual awakening type thing. And do you remember what the guy said about his experience with it?
Didn't he say, "I've never went to the halls of Amante"? I'm like, okay.
He stayed in it for a really long time too. And he's like, well, it was bullshit, but the weed was good. Like, I don't know. He didn't say that, but I'm feeling like maybe that was what was happening. The girls were really pretty. I don't know.
Yeah, that was a recurrent theme too. The whole the girls are really pretty. We heard that like fucking 10 times.
Well, so the Moonies and Charles Manson for sure used this. And I know it's come up in other cults, but I can't remember them by name. And it's a recruitment technique that has a name. It's called flirty fishing. So you send your beautiful girls out into the world, and they flirt with young men, and they're like, you should come check out this thing. And then they get you there, and it's a cult. Surprise, it's a cult. So I felt like there was an aura of flirty fishing, even though they weren't like specifically sending the women out to recruit. It was like they didn't have to, because people would come to the restaurant and be like, wow, everyone here is beautiful.
Yeah. Well, it was Hollywood, so or LA or whatever. But yeah, it was just kind of like creepy to hear like how all the beautiful girls there. And I'm like, okay, we get it. There were pretty people there, but like, that's just how it was a lure for sure. I think so. The other thing is, and I know this is a bit jumping around, but the part where we talked earlier about the 70s being wild time. The other thing we didn't talk about that we had in our notes and I wanted to talk about was the fact that later on in the documentary, they're trying to recruit new people and they're having a tough time because the cops are giving them shit for recruiting underage people. And then they go to high schools to recruit people. High schools.
Because they had a band.
Okay. Yes.
Let's rewind, because they make it, this is so funny to me because they make it sound like this just sort of happened. Who could have ever guessed that our rich spiritual daddy brought a whole shitload of instruments and recording equipment, and then we just happened to start a band. Here's the thing I'm going to say. Objectively, the music was good. Like, for that time in the 70s, like you would not, I would not have been surprised. Like if I was listening to a station that specialized in music of the 60s and 70s, I would hear that and not think twice. Like it was pretty good. But they would get gigs playing at high schools, but they didn't just go play the music. He would literally be like, don't you believe in reincarnation? Don't you? And it like very leading question. And he's like, in that poster we showed, like he's standing there and the high schools were like, this is fine.
Yeah.
This is music people do drugs to, and he's telling the kids to join his cult, but like, it's fine.
Yeah. Fucking 70s, man. Fucking 70s. And yeah, that band, like they had their own recording studio and like they said in the documentary they made like 65 albums and like no commercial success for it, but like 65 albums is a lot of records.
There wasn't commercial success, but even at the time they were it wasn't false scarcity because it was genuinely they were pressing their own records, but like people really wanted that. It was like a big deal to be somebody who had a Source Family record. Which now, God, they're probably, I don't even want to think about how much it would cost. Like I meant to Google it before we did the show, and I didn't. And I think it's because my brain doesn't want to know. Like, it dropped the urge to find the cost because it was like, really, Renee, you want to be able to sleep tonight. Are you looking?
Yes, I am, because now I was going to look too, and I just never did.
I know they're like highly collectible still. The other thing is that they, because they had so many famous friends, famous musician friends, they, this wasn't in the documentary, but the guy who introduced me to the documentary told me this. They would have these printouts that would fit into the album covers, and bands would let them, like successful bands would let them put these inserts in their albums.
Yep. Yeah, I'm looking here like on an eBay thing. Oh, looks like it was sold. It doesn't say the price though.
Oh, if you have to ask, you can't afford it.
Yeah, I'm gonna be mad if I can't find a price, because I'm
Okay,
just curious. Like, there's some weird things though. Like, I this is outside of what we're talking here, but there was a guy I know who was, and it wasn't Zach Rosenberg who had commented earlier, but another guy I know who collected like weird albums, like weird vinyl records, and he said he was looking for one record that was. This guy was a nut, but he wanted to find a Confederate Army record. Like, they're out there, but they're really hard to find. They're very expensive. And I was like, that's like owning like Nazi memorabilia. Like, what do you want that shit for?
Okay. I can't find a price either, but I got to tell you the weirdest thing that ever happened to me. Because you said Nazi memorabilia. I was at a
Zach.
Okay. So I was at this outdoor Christmas market in Oxford, UK, not Mississippi. And there was like people selling jewelry and people selling like rare books and, like you name it. It was like a little vendor fair, and it was kind of a weird mix of things. And there was a guy there who, I wasn't paying attention, right? Let's be clear. I was oblivious for a moment. And it looked like he just had a bunch of military ephemera. And he had the stack of photographs, and they were candid photos of Hitler. Like things that you've never seen in a history book. You've never, like, it's just like him taking a walk with a child or him visiting a friend, like very surreal pictures, because you just don't ever see this stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so I said that, and he quoted me a price and said that he was not willing to break the setup. And I was like, oh, I mean, they're really interesting, but I don't think because it was a lot. It was a lot of money. I said, I don't think I could ever spend that much on something that, like I'm not going to display. And he goes, well, why wouldn't you display them?
I don't know. I'd like people to not think I'm an anti-Semite or a Nazi.
Well, I guess we lead very different lives.
Yeah. Display away, sir. Go ahead.
And then, the rest of the stuff on the table comes into focus, and it's like, oh, it's not World War II military stuff. It is Nazi military stuff. I have to go fast.
Agreed, Zach. Agreed. So now that we've gone completely off track, why don't we get back a bit to this cult? In that, like, so we had this whole thing. I talked a little bit about the rules, and there's like a man and woman, or a man and his woman, a man and his woman. That was a phrasing. His woman shall not be broken apart or torn apart or whatever. I'm not sure the exact phrasing. Before I get into the rest of that, they never make any, even though it's sort of the free love 60s, they never mention anything about gay couples. Like, there's nothing. It's just straight heteronormative. That's all there is.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
Uh-oh.
You turn. You go.
I did notice, though, that there was some racial diversity, which is actually pretty unusual.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So, but to that rule, that was Father Yod. That was his rule. And then he decides that he doesn't like that rule and asks his wife, who is named Robin, who let's dive into her in a minute here, and ask her about, would you be okay with me having other wives? And she was like, no. And he decided to do it anyway.
Well, so I want to back up a second because there was two things that happened before that I think that are really important. So he married off all the underage girls.
Mm-hmm.
He established that nobody's allowed to get medical care. And then one of these underage girls got pregnant. And they actually show video of the birth.
Mm-hmm.
And first of all, I was super icked out because she now, her contemporary self is talking about this experience. And she's talking about it with the man she was married to, who was named Sunflower. Not his real name, but
that was all of them had names, and we need to talk about that at some point too.
So she's talking about him and talking about the importance of the first baby, but when you're watching the video, she is nude. She's giving birth. I don't think it's weird to be nude when you're giving birth. You want to be comfortable, whatever, but she's hugging and holding on to Father Yod, not the father of her baby.
Mm-hmm.
And then also there's the story that Sunflower tells that I have a million issues with. Little known fact about me, I used to be a doula. And to be a licensed doula, which I never completed the whole licensing thing, but I went through the training and I assisted some births. You have to take a lot of courses on childbirth and what is normal and what's not normal. And the story is that she was in labor for over 22 hours, which made them think something was wrong. And I'm like, well, that's funny because that's not unheard of at all. It's not even a little bit abnormal.
It's not unusual.
Yeah, it's like, it wasn't like 48 hours, which is a thing that really happens, right? It was 20 something hours. So something must be wrong, which I disagree with. And then the baby finally was coming out and they noticed that it had the umbilical cord wrapped around its neck, which was presented as really harrowing, which if you are a mother and or the father and the baby comes out with the umbilical cord over, it is very harrowing. But again, not abnormal, happens all the time, often happens in the birthing process, like not like while the baby's gestating. And they say, the baby, he said he was so dramatic. And I'm sure for him it was very dramatic because it was his baby. I'm not, his experience is his experience. It just wasn't informed by science is what I'm trying to say. So he says, you look at the baby, it wasn't breathing, and you could just tell there was no life in that baby. And they unwrap the umbilical cord and the baby doesn't cry. That's our proof the baby is dead. And Father Yod takes the baby and he says something to God about how, if you bring this baby back, then I'll be your messenger forever, whatever. And he blows in the baby's face and the baby comes back to life. I believe that all of the things that they say happened. I don't think the baby was ever in any danger. Like, it's super common for babies not to cry as soon as they come out. That's where you get like the old trope of the doctor smacking the baby on the butt to get it to cry. Like, it's just really normal. It happens all the time. So really, like, they didn't know anything about birth. They didn't know that a 22-hour labor is normal. They freaked out because the umbilical cord was around the neck, which is understandable. And then he blew in the baby's face and it was fine. That's what happened. If you've ever had an infant that cries a lot, like a colicky baby or one that just, is sick or whatever, they will get to a point where they're not really breathing because they've cried so much. And that's what you do. And then they go, and they're fine. Yeah. Like, it's just so, when a parent experiences that, it is probably one of the most harrowing and upsetting moments of their life. But like, in the scheme of things, it was like such a normal birth. And they're like, and he brought the baby back from the dead. I know. Like,
Lazarus.
That was one of the things that happened, which I think, I doubt very much that Sunflower was the only person who believed that.
Probably.
He believed that he brought the baby back from the dead. Okay. And then the second thing that happened, and this was like a chilling part of the story, right, is that his wife, Robin, got pregnant after this. And she says, because she felt like things were starting to get to be a little much. And she said she thought that the baby would bring him back down to earth. And then they started calling him God. That all happened before he asked her if she'd be cool with him having more wives.
Maybe I have it backwards, but disorganized. But I thought when Robin got pregnant, she thought that would be something that would stop all the nonsense of him wanting other wives. Maybe it's like
he may have. So you might be right. He may have already brought it up to her, but he hadn't started. He didn't have like
doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he was already, to the people in the cult, being called God, changed his name to
Yahowa,
which again, Yeshua, God.
Mm-hmm.
And then he started marrying lots of girls and women. And I think that that's important, that these young girls already considered him God. Zach, you're so mean.
He's not wrong.
But yeah, I think it's important to note that, like, these 14, 15-year-old girls, like, they didn't think that they were marrying an old man. They thought they were marrying God.
Yeah, and he was an old man. Let's be clear. Like, he was old, not like 70s old, but like he was in his 40s and his 50s, I think, too.
In the 70s, where a man in his 50s doesn't look fresh and young.
No.
And that's just, I'm not like being mean about it. Like, that's just true. Like, we have a lot more stuff health-wise these days, and people just don't look as old at 55 today as they did in 1970. Like,
yeah, I mean, he had a big beard and everything, and the beard was all full of gray. It wasn't like, like this, but like, that's what I'm saying. It's like he didn't look like a young, strapping, Hollywood movie star. That's not what he looked like.
Yeah.
And yet he kept accumulating underage girls, and then would marry them so that nothing could be done.
I also got the sense that some of those women had already been legally married to other men in the cult. And he was like, well, she's my wife now.
Well, he did that. Remember the one lady who was with Sunflower, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right. And then she was actually, she's the same one who was really good friends with Robin, right?
Yeah, and he's, and I guess Father Yod, whatever, is told, I want you to be with Mercury now, which was a different guy's name. Mercury. I'm telling you, man, the names.
I love the guy Orbit, who was like, everybody got a cool name but me.
Yeah, he's like, I got, like, his partner had some nifty name, and he was like, yeah, you got that name. I got Orbit. Like, he was mad he got Orbit the Aquarian. Like, oh man, dude, you did get the short end of the stick.
There were a couple more that came up that were also not great, but yeah.
Yeah. So I think if they're gonna give you names in a cult, they should actually be cool names, or at least something.
But here's the other thing. Did you catch? He didn't just like in Teal Swan's little commune, she'd be like, your name is Cyan now. And that's whatever, that's fine. In this one, there's actually a day that they all went to the courthouse and changed their names legally to the made-up name he gave them, middle name the, last name Aquarian.
Yep, they did that. They went en masse to the courthouse to do that.
Could you imagine being that poor county clerk, just like, what is happening? There's all these men dressed like Jesus. Their wives are all 17.
Yeah, or younger. Yeah. So yeah, that was like, at least they committed to the bit, I guess, is like they changed it.
And then a lot of them just
kept it.
Like, they're in the documentary right now, and it's not like
Dave,
Bill and Sarah.
It's not Dave.
Blah blah blah. It is just like Sunflower and Orbit and Rainbow and
Dandelion, and like, you're like, okay, all right, so yeah, the names were just outstanding, but I mean, the other thing is when you talked about the birth and how that went, and then also having Robin, who had a different name, but it was like a like two letter names, like hyphenated, and I can't remember what it was.
I don't remember either, but she was supposed to be. He is supposed to be the father, and she was supposed to be the mother.
Be the mother. Yep.
And then, like, one of the minor girls was supposed to be his mother, but also she was his wife. There was some weirdness there.
Yeah, a lot of. I'm not even sure you can call that Oedipal or anything like that. That was just really a lot of really weird lines going on there.
You know what I feel like, and I don't know if it was like intentional, but on some level intentional. How can there be a power imbalance if I am saying you're my mother figure?
Even though I have power over you because I run the whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But so with the birth thing, there's also, they said in the documentary, there were 54 births during this time. And this was not a long, this is what? It started in late 60s, and then by like 73, I think, was when it ended for him. But 54 births in that time frame is a lot of births.
Well, no birth control because no doctors, no medicine.
Yep.
And and I don't want to get into the rest because I feel like you've got your obvious statutory rape because the girls are underage. But I feel like, is there any room for true consent in a high control situation like that?
No.
So I don't want to dig too deep into that. It's just a thing that was occurring to me as I was watching it, where it's like he's exerting much more power over the women than the men, and he's exerting a lot of power on the men. So it's very fucked up all around.
Yeah. And, it was just weird because, he kept getting older and these girls would come in and they were still 14, 15, 16. Like, they were coming in at that age, and he was like, yep, you're mine. And it was fucking gross. Fucking gross. Yeah.
0 out of 10. Do not recommend.
Yeah.
It was gnarly. Okay. So he's got 13 wives.
Yeah, he gets to 13 wives. What? 13 is an interesting number.
Not counting Robin, because another heartbreaking thing that happens is she says he's like walking around with his little harem, and she says like, "Hi, honey," or "Hi, baby," something like that. You assume as she has always spoken to him, and he says, "You're not allowed to call me that anymore. I have these 13 wives now." Just absolutely punted her to the curb. No second thought.
Yeah.
And you know that she goes by her actual birth name these days, where a lot of the others do not. So I'm sure that played a role.
Yeah. And that woman also, man, she had health issues when she was there, and she has major health issues now. And then you think about the fact that they couldn't seek any medical treatment when she was young. Just how much did that exacerbate her issues, because she has MS. So it's it's a snowball thing. Literally, she went in and she just didn't go see the doctor.
And you have to wonder how much of it, she may have been look at the amount of stress I'm under while my husband is married to 13 other women, and flaunting it in front of my face and devaluing me every day. I feel like the emotions you would feel in that situation would take a physical toll, and you maybe wouldn't be able to separate the physicality of feeling emotionally like shit all the time from the physicality of something is actually wrong, especially not without the help of a doctor.
Yeah, for sure. It's something that that stuff takes its toll. Mental things you deal with mentally actually can manifest themselves physically. So
there's a lot of interesting research on trauma responses, especially if you're having an extended traumatic situation.
Yeah.
Presenting as autoimmune disorders. So yeah. But again, like, I just, even if that is not what's happening, you're also like, well, I was up all night crying and I feel like crap in the morning. I'm not going to the doctor for that. I'm going, well, I was up all night crying. That's why I feel like crap. Like there's just,
yeah. It's, and you don't really hear much about any other people having health issues outside of that, but like, I gotta imagine there were other folks who
well, there were a lot of people in that documentary were still true believers. Now, one, and I think it wasn't Sunflower. What was that guy's name? He said when Father Yod started marrying the young girls, he was like, oh, I don't know if I like this. And then what ended up making him leave is that his son, who was a toddler, was desperately ill and they would not let him take him to the doctor.
Yep.
And then he was like, screw this, took his kid, got him antibiotics. His kid was okay. So that, like, you have to wonder.
Yeah.
The people who stayed accepted this, and the people who didn't accept it, like, they left because there was something wrong. I don't know. Like, there could have been, I think medical neglect can surface in different ways. Like, you could just be old before your time, or, instead of getting over like a chest cold in a few days, you end up with bronchitis for a few months or whatever,
Yeah. Yeah, but you're right. There were some people that stayed true believers too, even now. And it's kind of after everything that's kind of transpired.
We have to get into the little like thing at the end that tells what everybody did, but not yet, because I feel like we need to like cover how unsurprising some of those are based on what we know about the source. So it's very weird. But so I'm going to go back to the fact that they didn't believe anything, because Father Yod was very clearly a guy who didn't know what he believed. And like whenever he found something interesting, he'd just go all in on it. Mm-hmm. And this is kind of a weird one, because it's like this like little nucleus of stuff that other cults we've covered does. So they did weird religious cosplay like the Unarians.
Yeah.
Including racist Native American costumes. Because he would decide that, well, and they didn't say a certain tribe, they said Native Americans. So Lord only knows, it was probably, but he would decide that this Native American spiritual practice, blah, 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 is like, this is the thing. And they would all dress up like Native Americans and do these Native American rituals and blah, 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 blah. And then he'd be like, actually, it's, I don't know, because it started with yoga. So actually, it's this other thing. And they would just keep jumping around. And every time they changed, they'd get like new outfits.
Yeah. Yeah. The outfits were like a lot of cults do the outfit kind of thing. Like, Nexium had the little sashes, the Rajanishis, who we haven't covered, had the kind of the red garb, like they wore red. And a lot of them do this sort of thing. But they were ones that just kept changing by the whim of Father Yod. Like, it was like, whatever. He's like, okay, now we're all going to dress like this now. Like,
I think it's particularly interesting because you would think, and in a lot of these cults, it's like, yes, the cult leader gets you in by being kind of charismatic and magnetic and convincing, but people stay because then there's a narrative woven around that, right? And in this case, they're like, you're God. And he's like, I am. And this is the right spiritual path. No, wait, I was wrong. This other thing is the right spirit. And he keeps changing. And it's like, I wish that the documentary had covered whether people, like, whether there was kind of a revolving door sometimes. I feel like there had to be some people who were like, oh, but I came here for yoga. So I'm out.
Yeah.
Like.
there had to be, but those were like surface level people.
Right.
As with all cults, there's like an inner circle bit, and that's where the things got kind of squirrely. Those are the people that were living full time. You know, the other thing that's interesting is like they were living in this mansion, and like all the neighbors started complaining.
Right, and so then they moved into a tiny little place.
Yeah, they moved into a 3-bedroom house with 140 people. 140 people.
The first house that my husband and I had was 899 square feet, 2 bedrooms. And we got a really big dog. And we were like, okay, the house is a little small, but it's fine. And then we had our kid. And when they started walking, it was like, if we don't move out of this house, we're getting a divorce. Because it was just so small. And there's like a dog. And every time he wags his tail, something gets knocked over. And like, you know, the baby plays with one toy. And it's like, the entire house is a mess and I can't walk. Like, we had to get out, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah, 100 people would be a little bit much.
Yeah. And they said they were making like, I don't know what the word they used. It wasn't like cubicle, but like compartments or something where they would sleep. And I was just like
the little, I stayed in one of those Japanese cubbyhole hotels once. I feel like it had to be like akin to that, but probably not with a bathroom.
Probably not as luxurious as a Japanese cubbyhole. And there was only I think there's only 2 or 3 bathrooms in the place, and like so you have all these people and they have kids, and like just the amount of people had to be just like it was cramming too many people in one little place. But
I'm having an internal crisis right now because I'm trying to think, when did disposable diapers become common? And it worries me a little that it was, in addition to the fact that nobody had a job. Like, I don't know, were they having to like deal with washing diapers on top of that? And also, even if they weren't, like, babies don't care where they poop. Like, they'll poop up their own backs, and you got to wash those clothes.
Yeah, according to the Googles, Pampers came out with the first commercial, like widely commercialized version of disposable diapers in 1970. So right in that range.
There's a good chance that, yeah.
I mean, they were invented in the 50s, but Pampers was the first one to like kind of mass produce it. So.
Yeah, because I remember my grandmother, who was having babies in the late 50s through the 60s, because she had a lot of babies, was absolutely horrified at the idea that I would do cloth diapers, because she was like, when she found out about, like, with her last baby, she could use disposable diapers. They were like freely available. It was like the most wonderful thing that ever happened to her.
The greatest invention ever.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't have to clean the diaper and then wash them? Like, okay, great. Sign me up.
I think if you think about like the fact that they're all like raw food, vegan, crunchy granola, like, I feel like there's a really good chance.
Only 2 or 3 bathrooms. That had to be. That toilet got a workout. That's all.
Yeah.
Ooey.
I feel like I'm like on the verge of just going into 1,000-yard stare right now.
Yeah. So let's not stay there then. But just know. What's that?
After the little tiny house, they move to Kauai.
Yeah. Somehow they were able to. Oh, because they sold the restaurant.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah.
But how much money did they sell that shit for? Like.
But they're saying he also had his own money. That he was a millionaire.
That's what they're saying. Where did he get this money?
I don't know where he got the money, but I kind of believe it, because where else was this money coming from? These people worked for him for free.
Yeah.
So, and he had a Rolls Royce.
Yeah. And he had probably sold that for a decent penny, because he's not going to have that thing trucked out over to Hawaii. But they go to Kauai. Kauai's fun.
Here's what's so weird to me. I didn't realize this until I was watching the documentary, but like, apparently a lot of cults moved to Kauai in the early 70s.
Oh yeah, they mentioned like a couple others that were there, and I was like,
Yeah,
wow.
and so the people of the island were like, "Oh my god, not another group of fucking hippies." Like, and there was like
Fucking
a
hippies.
drive-by because the people wanted them to go back to the mainland so bad. They were like, we're not Cult Island. Get out of here."
Yeah.
So there was a drive-by, and that's when he decided to militarize everybody.
Mhm.
And again, another chilling quote is you hear him giving this speech about the militarization, which all these people are hippies. They're like, one guy even says, he's like, I dodged the draft, man. Like, I'm not here to learn how
I'm
to
not
be.
here for that. Yeah.
Um,
Oh, and
but
he said something about he said I had a gun. I could have pointed it the wrong way. I don't know. I'd never used like
I know, right? But you hear Father Yod say, nobody's going to get hurt, even if someone gets hurt. Nobody's going to die, even if someone dies. You're like, I don't know, man. These seem mutually exclusive to me.
that's a pretty good weed that day. I'm assuming because if you're coming up with those quotes and everybody's like, "Oh yeah, man,
Well, I
right
believe
on."
in reincarnation.
Yeah.
Um, I find it hard to believe that they weren't doing mushrooms. It didn't come up in the documentary.
No, they did. There was one point where he talked about they had mushrooms at one of the things.
Okay, you're right.
I don't know when it was. I just remember him saying that. And I was like,
I
ah,
just feel
yeah,
like
I'd
it's
imagine
happening all the time. Like, you don't have a psychedelic band and you're not doing psychedelics, right? Like, that just seems
defeating
like
the
the way of
purpose.
things. What?
Defeating the purpose.
Yeah, like, I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah.
And you've got to get people to like take a mushroom and be like, you are God. Oh my God.
Oh, that makes total sense now.
I've never done mushrooms, but as I have heard other people say, like, that it does like create this feeling of like, I mean, I've heard bad stories too, don't get me wrong. But in the good experience, it makes you feel like very open to like all the positives in the world and very like, oh my God, I am love. And so I could see it. Like, you take some mushrooms and you're like, this guy with the Rolls Royce who's buying me everything I want is God. Like, I don't
Yeah. I have done mushrooms and I it's very much like that. It's like
there you
it's
go. All right.
very, very much like that. I ended up talking to a bonfire. Like I thought that, hey, bonfire, how are you? I was having like a conversation with fire. My wife thought that was hilarious. But
That felt amazing while you were doing it there. You're like,
oh, there's a connectivity that happens. It sounds freaking weird because it sounds like that's like logically that doesn't seem possible, but there's like this sort of ethereal connectivity you have on shrooms that makes you feel like you're able to connect to anybody and anything. I
so they were definitely doing a lot of mushrooms. I'm just going to say it.
what's that?
They're going to do sue me for libel. They were definitely doing a lot of mushrooms.
Oh, for sure.
Just now.
I don't see how they couldn't. And what's funny is because
Oh,
they probably deem that like weed, like it comes out of the ground, so it's a plant, so it's fine.
right.
So like not a drug, but even though
Cocaine is a drug, but the drugs that make you love me as your God are not.
are fine, are fine, are fine. Yeah. So yeah, the shrooms are definitely something that I have not heard. I don't have a lot of experience. I only did them once, but like it's something that I would not be objectionable to doing again because it was such a cool experience. But uh, it's they had to have been just for the amount of like the things they were doing and talking about and how willing they were to just kind of go along.
I mean, just like the band part it was a small part of the documentary, but a very big part of who they were.
Mm-hmm.
And they were a psychedelic band. Like,
Yeah.
those bands are called that because they would do mushrooms and make music.
Yep. So they had to be.
So psychedelic musically. They did a lot of mushrooms and then made music.
Shroom music. Yes. Mushroom music. There's a little alliteration there for you.
So, okay.
Sorry.
Let's talk about, because we both put this in our notes, because we talked about the multiple different religious things, but we skipped over, a really weird one to me, where he apparently really got into the Golden Dawn, which, again, if you don't know, if you're not familiar with this, they're like the OG white dudes stealing culture from everybody and then saying that their thing is the best version of it and those things are not.
Yep.
But it's like the very ritualized ceremonial magic. There's like what's it called? Like an initiation you have to go through if you want to do it. Whatever. Like it's Aleister Crowley started there and then they got mad at him and kicked him out, right? Like it's a whole thing. He got really into it, but only the part that involves sex rituals, which was really interesting to me because that's like a very tiny part of the Golden Dawn. Maybe he got into it through the stuff Aleister Crowley wrote about it after he left. I don't know.
I don't know, but that was the only stuff he concentrated on as far as we know. And he was using it as, he termed it sex magic, which, that's part of the ritualistic bit about it, I guess. I just know that, my wife and I were watching this and she was like, that is not what it is. Like she was kind of mad. Because my wife knows a lot about these sort of things, like way more than I do.
One does have ceremonial sex rituals.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not what that's not what they're about. Like, I don't know. You have to be like kind of deep into their many different ceremonial rituals and beliefs and all of that to even hit on anything to do with sex, because it wasn't about sex. It was about like thinking that they could like rein the magic of all of these other cultures into one thing and make themselves the most powerful people.
Yeah. But of course he's going to fixate on that bit, right?
It's the part that gets me laid. It's the cool part. It's the most spiritual part, I mean.
That's the most spiritual. Most. Yeah. Blah.
Okay. So my favorite thing about this cult is how it ends. Which actually,
yeah, I have to agree.
It's a dark and cruel thing to say, but it's true. I'll own it. So one day, everybody gets together like in the morning or the afternoon. They don't really like say when they get up. I feel like it's probably late. And I love the way that everybody in this story, they try to make things matter that don't, right? She's like, and I wore black that day. And I never wore black, but I wore black that day. It's like, well, you owned a black outfit. So obviously you wore it sometimes.
At some point, right?
And I show up and Father Yod says, oh, you wore black today. That's very appropriate. And then he starts saying, I'm not God. And everyone's like, yes, you are. And he's like, no, I'm not God. I'm just a man. Like, I'm not God. And everyone's like, but you are. And he's like, I don't really think I am.
Yeah.
And then he's like, I want to go hang gliding today. And my drink, wait for it, guys.
Yeah.
And they're like, you should not do that because it's very poor conditions for hang gliding. And he's like, but I want to. And someone's just like, well, he always did whatever he wanted to do. So we knew there was no talking him out of it. And he turns to the woman who's dressed in black and he's like, I want you to launch me off the cliff, which I'm not an expert on hang gliding, but like you don't get pushed off a cliff when you do it. You just
no, not generally, no.
So they go to the cliff and he puts his hang glider on and she pushes him and he gets whipped away into the wind. And they make it sound like it was like a powerfully positive thing and not terrifying, which was super weird. Like, and this wind just takes him. Anyway, I'm sorry. It's not funny, but I find it really amusing because I'm a terrible person. So the wind chills out and he looks like he's gonna be okay. And then he's not okay. He crashes. And they make this sound like it's really meaningful that he crashes into like a Polynesian village. I don't know why that's powerful. It's just like there's a lot of those around. They live there. It's their island, but okay.
Yeah.
And he's alive. And you hear the recording, and they pictures of this, and you're like, oh my God, and he's, ow, really hurts. And then he says he's broken his back. So they take him back to the house. And this is why I think this whole thing is really funny. Because to me, it's really obvious he was planning on killing himself.
Agreed.
From everything he says prior to the moment the wind takes him away, I think it's pretty obvious that was his plan. He's in over his head. He doesn't know what to do. But they get him back to the hospital, and obviously he's not dead, and he's in a lot of pain. So he asks one of the girls that's fawning over him, should I go to the hospital? And she says, well, you could, but you'd be violating your own beliefs. And he's just like, oh, yeah.
Damn.
Right? Like, and that's why it's funny to me, is because it's like he never meant it. And you see, he never meant, how do you not realize he never meant it? He never thought he was going to break his back. That's why he said you can't go to the hospital.
Yeah, I think I agree with you that he was anticipating not surviving that. But yeah, it's just the hypocrisy being like, should I go to the hospital? Not if you want to violate your beliefs. Oh yeah, that thing. Okay.
Anyway, he died after that, which I hate to say this, but I'm going to say it. No great loss.
Agreed.
In this specific instance. But I thought it was really interesting because nobody talks about it like he killed himself. They talk about it like it was this unavoidable accident nobody saw coming. And it's like he is talking about how appropriate it is that people are in mourning colors before he even leaves the house.
Yep.
He is saying, I'm not God. Like, he's rejecting the very basis of his own cult. He's saying that it's appropriate to be in mourning attire. And he does something that everybody knows is very dangerous. And he does not seem concerned about any of this at all until he is in pain, but not dead.
Yeah, and that day when there's a recording of him talking about it, and he said, I think it's appropriate that I go without any training. That's how I feel like that's how I should be doing it. Like, he didn't have any training. It wasn't like he'd gone hang gliding. He's just like, I think I'm going to do this, and I'm not taking any pointers. I'm just going to go do it. Yeah. And so, yeah, that points to your straight on to the point of where he just kind of, I think you're right. I think things have been pushed around so much, and the people of Kauai didn't want them there, and he didn't know what to do. There was no other plan. He's probably, my guess is probably low on money.
Yeah, I think that's like super plausible.
Yeah. So, and it definitely reeks of him wanting to just kind of be like, exit stage left. I'm good. And the funny thing is, like, the one lady who, like you said, Keith Raniere and all these guys kind of want to film themselves, and this lady kind of documented everything, and she was like his photographer or whatever, and she was taking a picture of him as he's laying, and that was the moment he passed. And she said, I got the moment that he died. And she was very upset about it. And it was like, yeah, that does happen.
I feel like she was also talking about looking him in the eyes for a really long time before. And I feel like that was probably very traumatic. Like, they kind of make it okay. I think part of what happens in a high control group like this that is very spiritualized is that people will convince themselves of things that in the moment they know aren't true. And so I feel like the documentary, the members of the cult who are in the documentary make it seem like he didn't die immediately. They took him back and he died. And it was like very almost mundane.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it was spiritually significant that he died, but like he wasn't screaming in pain. He wasn't, he asked to go to the hospital and he was like, oh, right, I shouldn't do that. And that, but like they make it seem like nothing particularly dramatic happened after he broke his back.
Right.
And I feel like if he was deeply enough in physical shock to not be in extreme amounts of pain, he would also be deeply enough in physical shock to not be carrying on conversations. And so it's like, well, we know the conversations happen because they're recorded. So I feel like there's like something missing between he broke his back and he died in the retelling of what happened. Like I feel like there was probably a lot of consternation and panic on the part of the members, and he was probably in a lot of pain and probably very easy to read that on his face, and etc. Like I just don't think it was that calm and peaceful. I can't buy it.
Nah, you break your back, and there had to be something other to it, dude. Not just, you can't just, like, if you break your back, yes, that's traumatic, but it feels like there had to have been something else going on there too that kind of exacerbated that to him to actually pass.
And relatively quickly,
Mm-hmm.
they're telling. There
Yeah.
wasn't over a few days. It was like, I mean, it sounded like it was like between him falling and getting back to their home. We don't know how long that took, but
Yeah.
it wasn't very long after they got back to the home. So it's like, I don't know. I mean, there's a likelihood maybe he wasn't in physical pain because he was paralyzed.
It's possible.
But in that case, I still feel like the members would be freaking the hell out.
Yeah.
They believe that this is God and he's just laying there. Like,
Yeah.
so he's dead.
Mhm.
And a group of these people just buy up a bunch of land in Kauai next to each other and start little farms, and they just live there still to this day with their weird Aquarian names. And
Some of them do. Some of them also go to do other things.
Yeah, like I'm saying, there's like a core group that do that, and then there's the guy who starts a new health food store and calls it the Source Health Food Store.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go through so and so Aquarian was involved with this notorious cult and that notorious cult and this one and that one and that one and this one. There's like 10, and that happens like 5 times. Then there's the guy they show that's just like he was involved in something else, but like it doesn't sound like he's currently involved in anything but whatever's happening in his own head, which was kind of hard to watch.
Yeah.
And the one that really blew my mind is the guy who's like a pioneer in stem cell research.
Yeah.
An outlier. Like,
yeah. And then there's the other guy who created some business and then sold it for like $60 million or something like that. There was a different guy did that. And they're like, okay, like good on you that you managed to do something, but like that seems so kind of not how that story should play out 99 times out of 100, right?
You know what I feel like it might be? It's like, so we know, like through research, that it doesn't matter what substance you try. If you are like 90% of people, you will move on with your life and it will not affect you. And 10% of people, that's it, they're fucked. Like they experience an addictive substance and they will become addicted. That is just like, we don't really know why. There's a lot of debate on it, but we know that that's like kind of the ratio, right? And I feel like with cults, it's almost like the opposite, where it's like 90% of people who join cults that get like really involved, like these people did. They're the kind of people who are just always going to be looking for the next thing. And then there's this 10% who like got sucked into this particular thing, came out the other side, and they were like, well, that was a wild time in my younger years. Anyway, moving on. And I feel like the millionaires and billionaires that came out of the Source are probably the latter.
They're definitely the outliers of the crew. Yeah, it's what was Orbit and his partner doing? Oh, Orbit was like he's like orphaned by the capitalist America or something. It's something like he was like of corporate America. He's been abandoned by corporate America or something like that was like his thing. And his wife was like actually someone who had this regular old job, but like
But they were one of the ones that still lived on Kauai and like shared property lines with the other people, right? Or did I get that confused?
I think so. We know the one guy, the sunflower dude, he has 10 acres and his kid has 27 acres, and I'm like, how the fuck are you affording land in Hawaii? Hawaii's fucking expensive. Like,
and it's not like it just got expensive.
no, it's been expensive a long time because it's an island. Like,
Right.
even in the 70s, that shit was expensive. So I don't know.
Yeah, and nobody really talks about like how all these people left this cult where they didn't have jobs and bought a bunch of land in Kauai to live next door to each other.
One of the things that Jill and I talked about was the idea of like, all right, well, now this cult is done and you're stuck on Kauai and you have no job. How are you getting off that island if you want to go back to the mainland? Like, how are you doing that?
But I feel like it's so much cheaper to buy a plane ticket than it is to buy land on Kauai.
Oh, for sure, for sure. I'm not saying that, but like, if you're starting with nothing, how are you like?
I mean, you're like, "Hi, Dad.
Yeah, please send me some money so I can get home.
You know we haven't talked in a while, and I know you told me I shouldn't smoke so much weed, and you were right."
And now I'm on Kauai with no money and no way to get anywhere. So yeah.
Well, let's just sell Father Yod's remaining Rolls Royces, and we can all get home.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure he sold those before he went over to Kauai. I think that was how they kind of helped finance that trip a bit.
Probably. And did they say if they owned the house on Kauai or they were renting it? I can't remember now because they were renting the two places in California.
Yeah, I don't know if they were renting or what on Kauai. I don't know what that whole thing was. So
I would be so interested in like a documentary where you get to hear from whoever was responsible for settling his estate.
that would be kind of fascinating, wouldn't it?
Because he's got, I don't think he ever officially divorced Robin before he died, and they have a kid together. And then he's got 5 kids with 2 other women back like in the Midwest somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And then
who knows how many with the other women of the Source family. So
right.
Who knows?
That could be a whole like mini series in itself. It's just like settling Jim Baker's estate.
Yeah, and
everybody gets $1.
Also, I got a big kick out of the fact that his name was Jim Baker. So
I know. I liked in your promo, not that Jim Baker.
Yeah, so and who I think he spelled that Jim Baker spelled it Bakker. I think it was different, but like, yeah, not the same Jim Baker. Definitely not the same guy.
About as lovable though.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. The moral is
man.
don't put your kids in judo. Don't trust men named Jim Baker.
Those are 2 good rules to live by, I think. Yeah, I think that's a good place for us to kind of run.
Jim Baker. All of them.
Oh, man. So, sorry. I'm like now like on a bit of a coughing, ready to have a coughing fit because I was like, so I think that's probably a good place for it to kind of call it quits there on that because I'm not sure we can get any better than that. No Jim Baker, no judo.
No, I think you're right. I think we're going to be challenged next month to even do better. Yeah. So, do we want to talk about what we're doing next week? I mean, we talked about it a little bit at the start.
Yeah, we did. But what we are going to do is we're going to talk about this actually came on I actually hadn't heard anything about it, honestly. Is like, even though I sometimes I feel like my news sources are pointed in weird directions. So I said, you both said, oh, I have news about this one cult. And I was like, oh, I just know they have a documentary coming out on Hulu. And it is, let me just pull this up here as I'm super organized. Share. We are going to talk about this Stolen Youth. The inside, they called it Sarah Lawrence College, which is this. When I just kind of read the synopsis, I'm like, this is fucking. All of them are weird in some ways. This thing is like this girl's a student at this college, and her dad moves into the dorm with her and creates like a sex cult prostitution ring.
Here's what's particularly, I guess weird is the only word I can come up with, besides what you just said, because that is particularly weird. But Sarah Lawrence is an all-women's college,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of parents who send their daughters to all-women's colleges kind of pat themselves on the back of like, now I know that they're not going to be distracted, and they're not going to be caught up in party culture, and they're not going to like, go all in with some frat boy or whatever. And like, it's almost considered to somehow be like this weird intersection of being like really progressive and really conservative at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have this college that is this like ideal of like you're a feminist, you go to Sarah Lawrence. But also, if you're a parent, you're so excited that your kid is going to Sarah Lawrence because you don't have to worry about all the bad college sex shit or things that maybe you think are bad that your daughter wouldn't or whatever. And then here's this really horrible, weird thing happening. And like you said, it's apparent. And where was the RA? What is going on? I have a lot of questions. I hope
Me too.
That the documentary answers them. Also, I don't know if you were a fan of Arrested Development, but when they did the season 6 that came back, or was it season 5? I can't remember. When they came back after being gone for a while, part of the plot is that Michael moves into his son's dorm room. So it's considered absurd enough for a comedy that only deals in absurdities. And this actually happened and nobody noticed. And when he started breaking the law, still nobody noticed.
Yeah, I have a lot of questions about how even it got to the point that it did. So I'm hopeful that this thing kind of answers some questions. As we said at the beginning, there is justice in this. We know that he got sentenced to 60 years, and his
right-hand person also
right here sentenced to 4 years. I thought it was more than that, but maybe I'm wrong. But
what's weird is that like all the Nexium people got like, besides Keith Raniere, got like around 4 years. Like, is that just like the standard sentence for being involved in a cult?
And not being the main person, maybe. Here's the standard.
Oh yeah, okay. So I see you weren't the leader, and you weren't a Vic 4 years.
4 years. There you go.
And then I feel like just because we have time, I want to put this out there because Doug and I have said from the beginning that we didn't want to tackle any of the big ones for a while. So we got our feet under us. And today we decided, because we'd already decided to do the Sarah Lawrence one, and I think it's going to be really good. Today we decided to throw caution to the wind, and in 2 months, we're going to be doing the biggest cult we've done so far. One that we were both old enough to remember it going down when it went down.
Yep.
And it's going to be really exciting. So you have to tune in next month to find out what it's going to be.
Yep. It's a big one. It's a big one. So yeah. I think we're ready. I think we're all grown up. We can do it.
All grown up. It's not Jonestown. Doug and I are not that old.
No. I'm not even sure I was alive, and I might have been alive. I might have been barely alive, like a little kid. But yeah. Anyway, that is what we're going to preface. We're not going to tell you what it is. Tune in next month on April 5th is the next one for us. So where we talk about Sarah Lawrence College cult, and I'm excited, maybe the wrong word, because it sounds like I'm like, yay. And I'm like, no, it's not that. I'm super intrigued to see what this brings. So
I'm excited to share it with you, Doug, and the people who tune in for the live stream.
Yep. And as always, folks, thank you for taking the time on a first Wednesday of the month and joining us and commenting and playing along with us. Renee and I really enjoyed doing this, so it's really fun. And thank you for taking the time and doing that. Cheers, folks.